Hi, Tatiana. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone, because the people is hearing us from worldwide, from a different time zone. And here we meet in our first podcast in this year, podcast Happy at Work, and I'm Tatiana Koval. And today, our first meeting of the new year, this is Jane Morse. Hello, Jane.
Hello. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you, Tatiana. I feel very honored to be in your first session at the beginning of 2024.
Yeah, and today this is a good topic for this session. We'll discuss the trends. I think a trends is a really important topic, especially in the beginning of the year, because you build your plans. But before we are starting, Jane, may I ask you a little bit about yourself? Could you introduce yourself and your experience? I think what our colleagues from different countries could be interested to know more about you. And I hope that after our podcast, we will follow you at LinkedIn.
Yes, I hope so too. I love connecting with people. So thank you for that opportunity, Tatiana. I think something that interests me about 2024 is based on my background. I've spent almost 28 years, I think, in the wonderful world of recruitment. So I started with a big agency. I've had my own recruitment consultancy, which we sold because everyone was pregnant except for 2 people. So that was way back in 2005. And since then, I have been training companies on how to attract and select the best people for their teams. And what I love most about that is helping hiring managers to understand how that's a two-way process and how important it is to make people feel valued and respected, whether they are right or not for the role. And something else I really enjoy is coaching people in their careers. And because I've worked on both sides, I love being able to give people the confidence and skills that they need to be able to succeed in interviews. And apart from that, I live in Cape Town, South Africa. So for me, it's afternoon. I know you mentioned all the time zones. So that's where I am in summer.
Yeah, because here in Brazil, we have morning, you have midday, and also I know a lot of people who hear us, they are in the evening. So it's very interesting what we could cover different time zones by our podcast and share our knowledge with them. My first question to you is it's about trends and expectations from a perspective of a labor market, and what the recruiters worldwide should expect from this year, or what is the main topic for them, the main challenges which we could meet this year. What do you think about it?
Yeah, thank you, Tatiana. I think that what most people are seeing and saying is that it'll probably start off being quite a challenging year, which is quite hard for me to say because I'm an idealist and an optimist by nature. So I never like to think about that. But in reality, with the elections going on this year, with the different wars and challenges that the world is facing, we have seen a drop in our economies, especially in South Africa, for those who are also in South Africa. So it is a challenging time. We are hoping that that will be able to get better over time. And with that, we can't ignore the entrance of AI, which was a surprise, perhaps even to the AI creators themselves, in terms of how quickly it took off. So I think there's that almost injection of, okay, we're in for a difficult time, but we're also in time for an accelerated change and time of learning as people get used to using new tools. People always talk about the youth and the generation Z or Z that are coming into the workforce, and how do we attract and retain them? But again, we were having this conversation recently, and it seems like there's always that conversation amongst the older members of the workforce, amongst them, about how do we attract the younger members. So I don't think it's only in this day and age that that people are facing challenges with how to deal with and attract the younger members of our generations. So yeah, I would say those are the most. And
Mhm.
then also with from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective, I think we need to continue to work on that as a world. And it's especially important as AI develops because we want our algorithms to be as unbiased as possible. And I know sometimes, you know, people see AI as a solution for unfair discrimination, but the more biased human input goes into creating those and setting those algorithms, the less chance that we have that technology will help it be a more fair process. So I think that's also really important, that people who are different are not just recruited, but also involved
Mhm.
in creating AI tools and in implementing them and in training them.
Mhm.
So yeah, I don't know if that gives you enough of a little
I think,
piece.
yeah, I think that's enough for well, short perspective of the coming year. And my next question is about AR, AI, because I'm absolutely agree with you. What I think the previous year was the revolution of AI, and there was a huge change in the abilities and way how people work in different areas. That means what we need to find candidates who could work with AI more, and so I would ask you what AI means from the recruitment perspective, from the perspective of the competencies of candidates, and also from the perspective of competencies of recruiters. What is your
Yeah.
opinion about it?
Sure, yeah, and I think it's a huge topic, Tatiana. So I think it's something we could talk in depth about. And I think what's also important is to really say that the recruitment process has now expanded in definition. Whereas I think many years ago, people heard recruitment and there was more of a sense of, okay, it's when I contact you and invite you for an interview and make a hiring decision. Whereas now recruitment is much more about employer branding, the employer value proposition, and how we attract candidates before we even meet them. So in my workshops, I always spend time with hiring managers around their profiles and how they show up asynchronously on social media. Because if you're attracting those younger generations, they are going to go and look at who you are online first. And what is your virtual presence before they meet with you in person? So I think if we're looking at that whole process and then right through from the interview to the offer to the onboarding, that's also included in recruitment. I mean, somebody hasn't been recruited until they've stayed there and invested and worked and almost paid back what the company has spent on attracting and selecting them. So if we talk about AI in recruitment, then it's all the way through that process. And there are so many different tools that are coming up all the time and that are being constantly refined. So I think most of the advice that recruiters are getting and giving is find out which part of the process you need to be able to get done more efficiently and see what tool works for you for that, because there are so many. I think ChatGPT, it was interesting because I was having a conversation with somebody and I was expecting in my training at the end of last year, as I was training recruiters, I was expecting that everyone would be using ChatGPT, but it wasn't the case. So
Mhm.
many people were still, and these are some senior recruiters were like, oh no, I haven't tried it yet. I'm a little bit scared. And there was still that sense of, am I going to be replaced? So I think this year, those who are not starting to use it are definitely going to start feeling left behind even more strongly if they haven't felt that already. So there is that urge to just use an AI tool like ChatGPT or like Bard or something like that to help you in your daily tasks. But in saying that, I think the danger is when people start to use AI, be it ChatGPT or any other tool, to replace their own brain and their own thinking. Because even when I train interview skills and I say, well, go to ChatGPT and get some help on designing interview questions for a role, it doesn't always give you the right questions. It doesn't always help you with the right answers. And sometimes the questions will be leading or hypothetical or multiple. So it's more and more critical that in our age of AI, people have that conviction that we're not just dealing with information. We're getting information, but we have to assess it critically. We have to pull what we need and apply it in a way that increases that human connection and helps us to be better at what we do. We can't use it to kind of replace our brains. So I think that's important in terms of what we use it, in terms of helping us for an interview or writing a job description. I mean, somebody who's a very senior executive was talking the other day about how much she uses ChatGPT just to write her job descriptions for her. But again, it doesn't always spit out the right description. So she has to use her knowledge and expertise to vet that and say, is this accurate? Is it appropriate? And then we also need to get on to make sure that it doesn't sound like everyone else. We need to have that authenticity, that spark, that personality that AI tools, not all of them have yet. So yeah, there's so much. Yes, please tell me, what did you want to say?
Yeah, I think we also you pay attention what we need to critical thinking as a recruiters, and I think what we need to assess with critical thinking to recruiters and to our candidates, because all of them will use the ChatGPT at least, and you should assess a lot of times, especially when we talk about Gen Z. Generation, they like these tools, but we forgot to check the information. So
Yes.
which is a common mistake. And I think one new additional question to recruiters, which we need to add, how to handle with AI and how to check this information. And also, I know what some candidates use the ChatGPT during the interview. And also,
Yes.
you have to check these candidates more, pay more attention to make the check the candidates because it could be a problem in real life. He or she could not work without it. Absolutely,
Exactly.
absolutely agree with you. And what is we also talk about diversity, inclusion, and equity, and what is about from the generation perspective. We young generation, they are commonly like to use different tools and technologies. They're open to it. They start to use it before the recruiters ask to use it or not. And with people from another generation, they worry about it. What is about, I think, to ask about this perspective, how we could assess the people from a different generation for using AI tools. And also, if we implement AI tools in our recruitment process, what is about now, we need to save a human touch during the recruitment process, because we talk about candidate experience, but AI tools could help us to improve our efficiency. What is the right balance? And how we could implement it from a perspective of different generations. What do you think about it, Jane?
Yeah, I think you've made some really good points there, Tatiana. And you're right that I think especially the younger generations love technology. And along with what you're saying, they are also using technology to apply for roles. Something they also need to be careful about is not just using it and sending it off as it is. I've heard recruiters and hiring managers say, I can't tell the difference between the candidates. They all sound the same, because they've all asked ChatGPT to draw up this email or this offer with a CV for them, whatever the case may be. So I think that that's one point, is still to be careful and bring in the personality, the authenticity. And you talked about the human connection, which I agree is so important and such a differentiator. I mean, my favorite quote is still that Maya Angelou quote that went around over lockdown, that people will forget what you did, they will forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And I even asked somebody on LinkedIn today, he was sending me messages. I said, can I just check quickly, is this you sending me the message or is it AI? And he said, no, it's actually me. I said, I'm so relieved. It's so nice to actually speak to a human. So So yes, I think it's important for helping us be efficient, but it must not take away that human connection, because I'm sure you feel it too. As soon as I feel like I'm just being spammed by AI, or they give an inappropriate answer, or it feels too scripted, it's so off-putting. And so I think as companies are employing AI tools, it's so important to get something that still maximizes that human connection. Like, I think Job in Cloud is one I've looked at. And I was speaking to somebody about their system, and what they do is they do marketing campaigns. They help with sending messages out onto LinkedIn, or to candidates via different platforms. But as soon as somebody engages as a human and responds, then it switches and it becomes a personalized experience, and it kind of alerts the person, who then starts engaging as a human. So I think as long as it's a personalized experience, yes, we want efficiency, but no, we don't want to take away that human experience. And with with DEI, yes, I think something I'm struggling with is maybe the older generations want to use AI tools or automation to streamline their recruitment process, especially if it's not their core function. They're not really comfortable in an interview. So, for example, they might say, well, let's have video interviewing, because then I can watch these video interviews after hours and just assess the candidates from the videos that they share, which is wonderful if the role requires you to be somebody who shows up well on video or has really good communication skills. But if you're recruiting for somebody who freezes in a video, it's going to be very hard to select somebody, because that first impression bias kicks in and you see the person and you think, oh, that's not a very good impression. So I think, again, with all of these tools, they have to be fit for purpose. So yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. You should understand that people are different and the
Yeah.
companies are different. And you talk about authenticity is very important. As I
Mm.
see the last trend in LinkedIn, for the people start to share their prompts. They offer to take their prompts and use it for their personal branding on LinkedIn, for sending and so on messaging. But I'm absolutely sure that you can take it, but you need to personalize it. What is this balance? What advice could you give, for example, to recruiters who want to use different tools, who use to some template? How to keep their authenticity? Because I think what in this year we should to talk about it, because absolutely
Mhm.
sure when I read some posts, sometimes when I read some messages, I feel myself that I'm not connected with real person or
Mhm.
the people who represent any companies. I feel myself like I'm speaking with Chat GPT, but I'm
Mhm. Yes.
expect the person, and how to lose yourself in the world of AI. What is your advices,
Mhm.
at least for
Yeah, that's
recruiters and for candidates?
yes, absolutely, Tatiana. Such a good point. Well, I think the starting point is always, why are you doing the work that you're doing? Or why are you applying for that job? And I find if people, whether they are a candidate or a recruiter or a hiring manager, if they cannot tap into, why do I love what I do? Why do I want to be in this role? It is very difficult to stand out from the rest. Because if they don't know who they are, and I know identity is also a topic at the moment. So I'm not meaning who I am in terms of, my identity from a gender or, racial perspective, but identity in terms of my values, what's important to me. What can I give to the world? What impact can I make? Do I want to make? If people can tap into that first, and sometimes it's, I see it in my coaching, it takes a couple of sessions for people to really distill what is the difference in their unique value proposition. Once they can tap into that, then they can start articulating how they can make a difference, or why I should get this role, or why I should hire this person. So I think that's where it all starts for me. I love, there's that one video that Simon Sinek shared a while ago called Sales is Just Like Dating. And I don't know if have you seen it?
No, no.
No,
I
oh,
hope to watch it after our conversation.
it's really funny. He talks about how if you went on a date and if, so if I go on a date and I say, oh, I try and impress this person and I'm like, you should see my house, you should see my job. I'm just so fabulous. I'm so good looking and I'm always on TV. That is such a failure. The other person is just going to think, oh no, please get away from me. You're so arrogant. You're just talking about all the wonderful things that you do. But it's so different if you talk about how you love what you do and why you do it. And maybe the fact that you're on TV is a consequence of you being so successful in what you do, but because you love it, then it doesn't sound the same. And then people see value in what you do. So I think, especially with that. So when I'm coaching candidates to go for interviews, I really try to help them to not just recite the values of the company that they're going into or want to go into, but to really think about, what do I already have that I can add value in this role? And what does this role have that is exciting for me so that I'm going to stay there and go the extra mile and really invest? And I know when we say stay these days, it's not 5 to 7 years as it used to be. It might be 2 to 3 years. So there again, recruiters and hiring managers are no longer trying to get to the point where they are no longer thinking, how long will you stay with us? But rather, even if I have you for a shorter time, what value can you add? What impact can you create so that you are a worthwhile investment of my time, my training? So yeah, I think that's important. Tapping into your why is, I think, the first and most important step. And then you have to push that across all your platforms, be it your virtual presence, your in-person presence. If you don't show up as the same person, then it breaks trust.
Mhm. And also agree with you. I think what in the beginning you need to pay attention to your mindfulness to understand yourself, because without understanding you couldn't achieve any authenticity in your life, in your communication, and I think the recruiter also understand it. My next question I want to ask you is that now recruitment, it's not only the work of the recruiters, it's also about employer branding. And what usually we have a special person who is responsible for the employer brand of the company, but recruiter, as for me, as a person who have a huge experience in employer brand management, they're very important person. The recruiters of the company, the manager, the line manager who recruited people. What do you think the people, recruiters and line managers will hire people this year should pay attention, and this year from a perspective of a company employer brand?
I think something that I've seen become more and more important, Tatiana, is social trust. So I think what I see is companies, we even saw it with DEI and over the lockdown, where candidates started to lose trust that a company just had some really good values on their website, or that they looked really good, wasn't a building anymore, maybe it was a virtual, site. And they started to look at sorry, did you want to say something?
No.
You looked, you looked like you were. So, and they started to move to, well, what are your employees saying about what it's really like to work there? So if you say you value diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think Lorata Semenya and Vanessa Rothward were talking about this, the saying is, it's not just about being invited to the party, it's also about being invited to dance. And I think candidates have started to say, you say that, but when I get into the company, is that really what I experience? So I think, I have one friend who said she was recruited to an organization, and she's kind of the right profile in terms of a diversity profile. People love her, she's got great skills, but she says, but once I'm in the company, my challenge is proving to people that I wasn't just recruited for my skin color or my age, or, so So there's always that challenge. What is the company culture like? What do people say on social media platforms, on Hello Peter or Glassdoor or Indeed, or wherever it is? What are people saying on LinkedIn? So I think that's key. I think what companies are moving to more and more is when candidates apply for a role, candidates are saying that they really enjoy it when they can find out more about the company through the recruitment process. So, for example, with the company HelloFresh and how Starred has worked with them to monitor their candidate experience through data analytics. And they've actually got specialists who are recruited to just look after that candidate experience and improve it all the time. But there was somebody, I can't remember where she sits, somewhere in Europe, I think. She said, I went onto the website and I thought, I just want to work here. Because when I go to this website, I have videos about what it's like to work there. I get to meet the different people. I have advice on how to succeed in interviews. I get virtual tours. So I think there's that, if people can access the information quickly and in a way that maximizes that human connection and that is authentic and that links to impact and purpose, then I think that's very attractive for people. Nobody wants to go through a lengthy process anymore. No one wants to fill in their information 20 times. So I think companies are seeing that more and more. And it's also more about videos and short clips, not lengthy articles anymore. People don't want to read so much.
Yeah, I agree with you absolutely, especially when we talk about the young generation. They
Yes.
use it's a very interesting situation what now, for example, in Instagram, we use different tricks for attract attention to videos for short time. I want to ask you a last question, because you gave very good framework of a trends, and about one more trends. You talk about diversity inclusion from the perspective of how to stay open-minded, from a perspective of the line hiring manager, from a perspective of recruiter during the recruitment process. Absolutely, absolutely agree. But all of us, we have our own biases. About people, the disabilities, about people of different countries, from different cultures, and so on. But I want to ask, what is your advice to people who need to hire? How could we stay open-minded? Not technical only, what I need to check this, but really understand what I'm open to hear this person. I'm open to understand. I'm open to pay attention cross-cultural issues, if especially I try to hire in the different countries. What is your advice to this person?
Yeah, good question, Tatiana. And I think something that every human being struggles with, because all of us have bias. And those of us who think that they are not biased are probably deceived, are definitely deceived. So I think there is more of an emphasis around the world for us to include diverse people in our application process, our selection process, in our workforce. So I think it does come down to any kind of tool that can help somebody be more self-aware and more open-minded. So what I normally do with hiring managers and with recruiters is help them become aware of the different types of bias that are really prevalent in the recruitment process. I think one that is really strong always is the first impression bias. So it's also called the horns and halo effect. And that is for all of us, that sense that we get when we first meet someone within those first few seconds, where we either immediately like them or don't. And we usually say that people unconsciously make a hiring decision in those first few moments. And the research shows that if somebody has a positive first impression from a candidate, they will likely make the interview process easier. And if it's a negative first impression, they will likely make it more difficult, which is really scary. So I think the first thing for people to do is be aware of the first impression bias, the halo and horns effect, that it exists, and be aware of what triggers a positive or a negative first impression for them. So it could be anything from a positive first impression is somebody who's energetic and whose voice is clear. And I have heard people say as well with a virtual interview, if the tech is working, it actually just creates a better first impression. And a negative one could be anything from somebody won't switch their camera on or their tech isn't working well. I've heard that too. And if it's in person, maybe it's a tattoo, maybe it's a hairstyle, maybe they're dressed too smart, too casually, too much makeup, too little makeup. Whatever the case may be, we have to each be aware of what our impressions are. And I do love that video called Brain Tricks. I don't know if you've seen it by ASAP Science, but it's wonderful, just about how our brains work and how we want to make decisions more economically. So naturally, we do want to lean into that quick judgment. But we need to recognize that first impression bias, and then after that, the confirmation bias, which means that we actively seek out information to confirm the judgment we've already made. I think the primacy and recency bias is really helpful to know about because it shows us, and we were even trained when we first went into recruitment. I remember being told, Jane, when you send a candidate to a client, make sure they have the first interview or the last interview, because those are the people who are most likely to get the job. So I think that's another bias that's really important to know about yourself. There's stereotyping. That might be age, race, gender, socioeconomic class, school, university, could be anything. But there's so many different types of bias. I think people educating themselves and then a large dose of humility to admit that they are human and you know what? I am biased. And to say, okay, to actively overcome that bias, I think the most powerful tool is curiosity. So when I feel triggered to be biased, let me be aware of it. Let me park it. And let me focus only on what is required for this job. Can I be curious enough to probe and get information that is evidence whether this person meets the requirements or not? And if I still have that uncomfortable sense, well, let me dig deeper and see what evidence is there for it, including background checks. So I think that really helps. I mean, I know in South Africa, we literally have statistics that really help managers to know, okay, for this role, I need to recruit somebody who is, Indian and female, for example.
Mm.
And then that helps managers be more intentional about focusing on who they don't have in the workforce at that level. Not every company has that legal requirement in place, but intentionality really helps.
Sorry, great. And my last question for you is about, you told about what we need, the trust. We need to build the trust between people, between companies, and about recruitment trends, as I see in the LinkedIn also, in the international communities in different countries, employee advocacy program. What do you think from a recruitment perspective? Employee advocacy program, is it important for us to build trust, to attract appropriate candidates? What is your opinion about this topic?
Yes, absolutely. I think building trust is critical, and we know there are books like The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey, the son, not the father. So we know that things will move a lot quicker if there's trust, and people are more likely to get roles, firstly to get the chance to be interviewed, and sadly to even get interviewed if they have a connection and somebody who is smoothing the way with trust. So employer and employee advocacy is important. I know Celeste Siren also focuses a lot on employer branding and that from that perspective. But I think, again, building trust for me is about that human connection. And that's what I also like about, programs like the AI tools, for example, that Job Crystal has developed. It's really around that human connection. It's not just the efficiency. Because if someone feels that there's someone in this process who cares and I'm not just a number, then that builds trust very quickly. So again, we also spoke about with AI, not just reaching out to people with automated scripts, but a personality, a person, a chance to connect. It doesn't have to be for a long time, but if people can identify in their recruitment process, which are the touch points where I need a human involved, then that really builds trust, that they're not automating the things that need to be human and making human the things that need to be automated. And I think a skill like active listening, I often train that in workshops, because if somebody is genuinely interested in someone else, I think that other person then feels that they can trust them. So if a hiring manager or a recruiter is interviewing someone for a role and they're genuinely interested about that person's career aspirations, and they're not just trying to get through the interview guide and, say their script, then that person feels a connection. There's mirror neurons that happen when there's storytelling involved as well. I know that's a whole nother topic, but that also builds trust. But again, I think it comes back to that human connection. And my favorite quote by Maya Angelou, that people will forget. I mean, people will remember what you made them feel and how you made them feel.
Jane, thank you for interview. And the last from you, your advice, or maybe your personal approach. I want to ask you 3 main topics you recommend to focus on in this year. Because now we're closer to the new year. This is the time of New Year resolutions to define the focus. So I decided to ask this question from you. 3 main topics. Maybe it's your own, and you will still advise to focus on any other persons, because we discussed a lot of very, very important topics during our conversation.
Yes. No, thank you, Tatiana. And I mean, you asked about, me personally as well. So one of my mottos for this year is be brave. So I want to learn and do the things that I've normally shied away from. And I do generally, go after things. But I'm excited about that this year. And there was even someone I was speaking to who wants to start coaching. And she said something she really wants to grow in is being confident. And I think that's what I'm hearing from a lot of people at the moment is they have the expertise, they have the experience, they have the ability to learn, but they're just too scared, or they feel like they're an imposter, that imposter syndrome. So I think my first piece of advice would be brave and be confident. And part of that is finding your why. So find your why, find your purpose, make sure that what you do is something that you personally won't regret. So I think sometimes we used to fast forward to, if you retire, what would you regret doing or not doing? But with COVID, we learned life is short. So all of us need to think, sure, if this was my last year, what would I regret doing or not doing? Let me focus on those things. And then again, I can't help but go back to the human connection. Don't forget that we're human. And yes, we have AI and we have automation, but it's not there to replace us. So learn what you need to learn about your AI tools and your tech, but don't forget that you are human, and go after those relationships that bring meaning, that bring connection, and that can help you and the other person find value and add value, so that together you create something that you don't regret. So that would be my advice for this year, in the chaos of it all.
Thank you, Jane. I hope that a lot of people who will watch our video will follow you on LinkedIn, and me also will have possibilities in the future to meet with you again, because it was really wonderful conversation. Thank you for I think deep conversation about very, very important topics from a different perspective. Thank you, Jane, our first guest of this year in the podcast, Happy at Work podcast, in which we discuss how to build people-centric organization. And today we start this discussion from the first step for people and human-centric recruitment with Jane Morse. Thank you, Jane. Have a good year. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too, Tatiana. Thank you so much. I've really loved this conversation with you. Thank you so much for the work you're doing.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.